Have you ever been told by a colour analyst that you are cool toned, but every cool tone foundation you try makes you look grey or a little bit off? Me too. Well, I finally figured out the reason why. The reason is going to shock you and stun you, and it's going to change the way that you buy makeup forever. My first question for you is, do you know your colour season? Now, the four main colour seasons are spring, summer, winter and autumn. And if you know which one you are, then you'll generally have a pretty good idea of whether your colouring is cool, is it warm, is it bright, and is it muted. There are lots of different methods for colour analysis and lots of different categories, but I am going to stick to the four key components. Are you cool, warm, bright or muted? So for me, I'm cool toned and muted toned, and I know that because I look best in shades like soft creams, soft blues, soft pinks, and I don't really get on with bright harsh colours or deep orangey mustardy colours either. The first thing you need to find out is what is your colour season. And being a muted cool puts me into the summer season. So now I know I'm a summer, that makes life a little bit easier when I'm buying clothes, buying makeup and changing my hair colour. And it generally helps me stay in harmony with myself if I make sure I align with cool shades and muted shades. Now, the second question I have for you is, do you know what your undertone is? And this is where things get messy. So let me give you a moment to decide. If I say I'm a summer, what do you think my skin undertone is going to be? I'll give you a moment to think about it. If you said cool, you would be in agreement with most of the literature that I have read online that says that if you are a summer, then you are cool undertoned. But guess what? I beg to differ, because I have been doing some research into what my skin undertone is, and I have got different results from everywhere that I have looked. The first test that everyone gives you is the vein test. Are your veins blue or green? Absolutely no idea. When I look at the veins in my wrist, I can see green, blue, purple, every colour under the sun. So that test has been completely useless to me in determining my skin undertone. Test 2 is, do you suit silver or gold? Now, we already know I'm a summer and summers tend to suit silver. And yes, I suit silver. I can also get away with gold sometimes. For example, sandals, shoes, things like that. I quite like gold sandals, and I can sometimes get away with gold jewellery. But silver, I would say, looks best. And again, that points me in the direction of having a cool undertone. But if I match my skin to foundations, or if I use some of the foundation AI tools to discover my undertone, do they say cool? No, hardly ever. Most of the time they say I'm a neutral or a warm. I did have one result from Lancome say that I was a cool, but you'll see later on that it is a very, very neutral, warm looking cool. So I'm a bit dubious about their determination that that foundation is a cool, but on the whole, the results I am getting are saying warm or neutral. And in fact, of the AI foundation matching tools that I have used, L'Oreal has said that I'm either a neutral or a warm. Number 7 has given me a warm. Charlotte Tilbury has given me a warm. Lancome weirdly has given me a cool or a neutral. And Fenty has given me a neutral olive. So now I'm more confused than ever. Because now I am apparently a summer, but the AI tools have told me that I am either a warm, a neutral or a cool. So that really narrows it down. So what I've actually done today is gotten out a selection of warm, neutral and cool foundations that I have bought under the various advices of the AI tools, and I have swatched them and compared them, and we will go through together to determine what do you think my skin undertone is in the end. So if you want to put your guess down in the comments before we go through and do our swatching, you'd be very welcome. I'll be absolutely fascinated to see what you think my undertone is going to be. So I'm going to demonstrate with two examples from each undertone. I've got two example foundations that are warm, two that are neutral and two that are cool. I have pumped them onto these palettes here and I'm going to swatch them on my chest underneath the correct letter. I think if I bring them a bit closer to you, you can see the warmth in one side and the coolness in the other side. And then in the central, we've got the neutrals. And I would say of those neutrals, one definitely looks cooler and one definitely looks warmer. So the top warm swatch is Estee Lauder Double Wear in the shade 3W1 Tawny. And the lower swatch is number 7 Lift and Illuminate in the shade Warm Ivory. So these are our two warm shades that we're trying out today. And from the two neutral shades, the top one is Estee Lauder Double Wear, that is in the shade 2N2 Buff, and the lower swatch is by Mario, and that is the shade 2N. And then we've got our cool tone swatches, the top one being Lancome 220C, and the lower one being the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless, and that is in the shade 3 Cool. So our full shade lineup looks something like this. And what I find most interesting here is that it's not really the undertone that is making the biggest difference here. The biggest difference is coming from the actual shade match. And I've seen each of these undertone groups, there's actually one standout that matches my skin and there's one that's either too light or too dark. So with the cools, I would say the upper swatch is a really close match to my skin tone, same with the neutrals, and then with the warms, the lower one. And what I'm seeing is that this other cool tone and this other neutral tone are really light, and this top warm tone is really dark. So fundamentally the shade matching is more important at this stage than the undertone. So of the warm shades, the Estee Lauder 3W1 I would say is a little bit too dark. I think the number 7 Lift and Illuminate in Warm Ivory, that looks like a pretty good match. I think that's this lower one here. I think that's a fairly good match to my skin. And funnily enough, the longer that Estee Lauder one sits there, the more I am kind of seeing it blend with my skin tone. So I personally think there's some hope for mixing together some of these shades to make better matches for me. But I think this is looking like a good match. Of the neutral shades, the Estee Lauder 2N2 is looking like a pretty good match at this point. I think the Mario 2N is looking a bit too light for me. Again, might be a candidate for mixing with another colour. And then we have, and interestingly with these cool tones, I think the top one is a really good match. I think that is the Lancome cool tone, and then this bottom one it's passable, but maybe it's a little bit on the pink side, and I think that was the Charlotte Tilbury shade 3 Cool. So I've transferred those exact same colours in the same order up onto my face. We have the two warms, the two neutrals and the two cools. And I would say here on the face we see the exact same results. We have got one that's a bit too dark and too warm. That's a fair match, that's a fair match. That's too light, that's a fair match, and that one was also too light. So we've got 3 candidates here. One is warm, one is neutral and one is cool. I want to point out that these are 3 different brands of makeup, and therefore the labelling of warm, neutral and cool doesn't seem to track across brands for me. So for example, the Estee Lauder one in the middle, that's 2N2, so that is a neutral. That's actually looking fairly warm to my eye. And the Warm Ivory from number 7 at the top, I would say that's looking more neutral. I think the one at the bottom It looks, I think, maybe slightly more pink in real life than on camera, or maybe that will come out later. But that is our Cool from Lancome. And I think this is where personal preference comes in. From these three colours, I'm preferring the top and the bottom ones. This Estee Lauder one in the middle is looking a bit orangey for my tastes. Although I actually have determined that I think this is slightly too dark for me. This is 2N2 Buff, and I think 2N1 is a better match for me. So I think that's the next one I'm going to try in the Estee Lauder range. But anyway, here we have three foundations, one labelled warm, one labelled neutral, and one labelled cool. And there is not an awful lot of difference, is there? Perhaps when we blend them out, or perhaps if we try them on the whole face, we will see more difference. And in fact, we've got one warm and one cool, haven't we? So let's go ahead and try one side of the face warm, one side of the face cool, to see if there really is any difference when we do the whole face. So I'm going to go ahead and make up one side of my face in a warm and one side of my face in a cool. Bearing in mind, there's not very much between these two shades at this point, but one is labelled warm and one is labelled cool. So if this is our warm side and this is our cool side, can you tell any difference? And do you prefer one side over the other? Now, I don't think this Lancome Cool shade is very representative of cool shades, so I'm going to go over a little area of it with the Charlotte Tilbury Cool shade. And let's put some of our warm Estee Lauder shade on this side as well. So now I've got a bit of a patchwork foundation quilt going on my face. What do you think of the four quadrants? Down here I have the Charlotte Tilbury Cool. Down here I have the Estee Lauder Tawny. Up here I have the Lancome Cool, and up here I have the number 7 Ivory Warm. I honestly don't think there is a right or wrong answer here. I think this looks really nice and bright and clean. I think this looks a little bit muddy, a little bit dirty on my skin. I think this looks probably the most natural, and I think that looks pretty okay as well. I think ultimately it comes down to trial and error and personal preference. And if, like me, you find yourself with a collection of too dark and too light, then there's always the option of mixing them together and seeing what you can come up with from mixing the two colours together. For example, this is a mixture of the Estee Lauder Tawny with the By Mario 2N, and I think by mixing together the different foundations probably is going to be our best bet in terms of finding the ideal shades. Fear not if you end up with foundations that are too dark and too light like I have here, because we can always mix them together and create our perfect shade. So once we have our homemade foundation shade on, we can go ahead and continue with the rest of our makeup as usual. Now, bronzer is a product where I'm not too worried about whether my undertone is cool, neutral or warm, because bronzer by definition is a warm toned product and contour is a cool toned product. So we look at the cool tone to create shadows on the face and the bronzer to warm up our face and give us a nice golden sun-kissed glow. So we don't have to worry too much about what our undertone is when it comes to bronzing, fortunately. So I've completed my foundation using my homemade foundation shade, which I mixed from a warm and a neutral. And we have discussed the fact that bronzer is by definition warm, so we don't need to worry too much about our colouring when picking a bronzer, but blush is something where our colouring starts to matter. And for me, even though my skin tone best suits a neutral warm foundation, that does not mean that I have warm colouring, and in fact, as we've discussed, I have got a muted cool kind of colouring, and for that reason our blush should match our colouring. So I'm looking for muted cool to neutral blushes to match my complexion. I'll show you some examples and kind of discuss where we can push the boundaries and where we can't push the boundaries. So if I show you this Jason Wu blush, I think this is a really good example of, we have here a cool bright blush, we have a muted neutral blush perhaps, and a muted warm blush. Now of these three shades, the center one I think is a definite yes for me. It's a kind of a muted, I would say it's a neutral. The bright cool, I think that is a definite no. That is going to stand out on my face and make me look a little bit clownish, unfortunately. And I think this one is okay if we layer it up with something cooler. I do find that I can get away with a warm or neutral blush if I'm going to layer it kind of rainbow style with a cool as well, using it like a forward and a backward. So if I have a cool at the front and a warm at the back, I think that works for me. But probably on its own, it might just leave me looking a little bit flat because it's not quite cool enough for my tone. Equally, I have a couple of really nice muted blushes, one from Dior and one from Yves Saint Laurent. Again, these are muted, and muted is good because that matches my colour profile. I think this one is a little bit cooler. I think that's a really good match for me. This one, this is the Dior in the shade Toffee. That's arguably a little bit neutral, maybe leaning warm. Let's say it's neutral because I have worn this and I think it looks really nice. So I think this is more of a neutral. This is more of a cool. But essentially I need to stay away from anything that is too bright or too warm. So equally, if I had a bright orange blush here as well, that would be something I definitely need to be staying away from. And unless you have a bright colouring with lots of contrast, then you're probably going to be in the same boat as me, and you want to be looking for muted blushes that align with whether you best suit cool clothing or warm clothing, or if you're a little bit like me, you might be cool leaning neutral or warm leaning neutral. So let's go in with the Dior Toffee, and then we will go in over the top with the Yves Saint Laurent. Like I say, I think this is neutral shade. I did wonder if maybe it was leaning warm. It might be leaning warm a little bit, but that is the other advantage to having slightly warm skin, is that because I have warm skin but cool colouring and a muted level of contrast, then I can kind of get away with things that are on in that middle area. So anything that is neutral leaning cool or neutral leaning warm, I'm probably going to get away with okay, and then I'm going to lean a little bit more into the cool zone as well. But anything very bright cool and bright warm are going to be out of bounds for me. Now I think that looks really pretty, but this slightly cooler one is livening things up a little bit for us as well. Now if you do have muted colouring like me, you're probably going to find you look best in a brown eye pencil and a brown mascara. It's okay to use a black mascara when you want a little bit more drama, but for an everyday natural look, brown is going to be your best friend. And lips are very much going to be the same as the blush. It's going to depend whether you are muted or bright, cool or warm, which suits you best. So for me, a muted, neutral, cool lip is what works best for me. In conclusion, although my colour analysis result is that of summer, making me a muted cool, my skin undertone, I think, is a neutral warm. How do you feel about that? Does that blow your mind that my skin undertone could be the opposite of my colour analysis result? It's certainly blown mine a little bit, and it is the reason it has taken me so long to figure out what foundation shade I should be wearing. I hope you found this analysis useful, and I'd be really interested to hear what weird combinations of colour analysis result and skin undertone you have got, and is it catered for by the advice you're finding online. So here we have the final look, which is completely in harmony with both my skin tone and my colour analysis result. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can take a look at my next video here. Don't forget, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.